What is up, everybody? Mr. Curtis here. Welcome to 6.6. This is the last video of Unit 6, and after this, we only got 2 more units left, so we're almost at the end here, everybody. This is the end of the Cold War in Europe. Just a reminder, Cold War, United States, Soviet Union, democratic, capitalist, communist, totalitarian. Two sides compete against each other to get more countries on their side. Space race, arms race. We see it around the world with proxy wars in Vietnam and Afghanistan and Cuba and the revolution. It's all around the world in this time period of post-World War II to 1991. And in this unit, this part right here, we're going to end it, get it done with, call it a day. So here's the deal. Cold War starts in the 1940s after World War II. We have the height of the nuclear arms race and the space race in the 50s, 60s. And in the 70s, we have this cooling off period. And it's referred to, this comes up on the Regents a lot. I don't know, they love this term. The term is détente. It's a French word, and essentially it means cooling or easing of tension. So in the 1970s, between the United States and communist countries, there's kind of this period of like, let's just sit down and start talking maybe instead of just revving up this rhetoric that we hate you and building up weapons and trying to do all these things. And let's just try and talk and talk things out, like a little kumbaya, sitting around the fire, whatever. And in the 1970s, the United States and USSR, we really see this time period of a little less stressful because of this détente period. And the president of the United States at the time, Richard Nixon, who is eventually going to resign from office for a whole bunch of reasons that you'll learn about in the U.S., is right here. And this is the president at the time. And he's meeting with the leader of the Soviet Union in this picture. And if you don't know this guy, you don't remember, that's Mao. He's the leader of China, which both these are communist countries. So he's sitting down meeting with these people, which would have been unheard of in the 50s and 60s. But we're really the goal is to ease tensions and cool things down. So as a result of this, we see a little more, not necessarily cooperation. We're not friends all of a sudden, but like we're opening relations with them, and opening relationships is probably what I want to say instead. However, with this, the U.S. is still building up their military. We're still spending a lot of money on their military. And a president in the 1950s had warned about this. His name was Eisenhower. He warned about something called the military-industrial complex, that basically the United States government is going to spend so much money on weapons. And to build those weapons, you need American workers. And you're going to have American factories build those weapons. And then you're going to hire more soldiers. And those soldiers are going to send money back to their family members and their wives and kids and husbands, whoever it might be. That what's going to happen is we build up the military so much that it's almost impossible to ever cut the military, because if we cut the military, we're cutting jobs, because there's so many people who rely on developing weapons, building weapons, all those things is part of it. And that is what's called the military industrial complex. And it's a little confusing, but basically it's a warning in the United States. And it really happens that the United States and the economy and the military become so closely intertwined. And if you look over here, this is a chart of the billions of dollars that the U.S. spent from the 1940s through 2024, basically at Biden's request for 2024. And you kind of see this huge jump in World War II, and then it drops significantly. But then the Cold War happens, and we have all this extra military spending. And you can see we've never really, although there's ups and downs, it's constantly like it's a slow increase, like a roller coaster going up, that we're continuing to spend more and more money. And that's just where we are. I don't want to get all soapboxy, but that's where we are, and it employs a lot of people. So it's very hard for politicians to cut military spending because of this. So that's where we are at that. And we do spend more money. I think I've mentioned this before, but we do spend more money on our military than every other country in the world combined. So we definitely spend a decent chunk on it. Move into the 1980s. So the 1970s, this period of détente, this cooling off. In the 1980s, there's a bunch of problems that start in the USSR, which is also known as the Soviet Union, which is also known as Russia. They have a large shortage of food and fuel. They're not producing as much as they anticipated, and they fight a war in Afghanistan. This is not the post 9/11 war in Afghanistan. This is a war where the Soviet Union goes in and invades Afghanistan, trying to spread communism to that region, and they get stuck there. It's like a 10-year war. After this war is over, everyone says you should never, ever try to invade Afghanistan. It's impossible. And for whatever reason, the U.S. leaders in the early 2000s didn't learn their lesson and tried to do the same thing, also unsuccessfully, but more on that in another video at some point. So the Soviet Union's going through all these problems. There's a shortage of food and fuel. There's increased technology so people can communicate. You can't just hide like new inventions and new communication tools. We got fax machines, telephone stuff. So people are interacting more. People in this communist Soviet Union who don't have access to new clothing and new foods and things that are going on in capitalist countries in the West, they want them. So there's a new leader who emerges in the 1980s. He's super famous. You need to know him. We'll do stuff about him in class. His name is Mikhail, which means Michael in Russian, Gorbachev. He is a reformer. He's trying to change this system in the Soviet Union that we've had forever, this communist system where you don't have economic freedoms and you can't do and buy and open and sell what you want. He's very similar to our boy Deng. He and Deng get compared a lot because they both are trying to modernize or allow for more economic freedom in their country. So what he does is one program is called Perestroika. And Perestroika allowed, similar to what Deng did in China, I'm going to keep saying this over and over, he's very similar to Deng. He allows for more capitalism. And when I say he allows for more capitalism, I mean you can own a business. You can have a foreign business come in, like McDonald's. You can invest in a business that you want. You can buy whatever you want. You have economic freedom to buy things that you choose, which is the opposite of what communism is supposed to be. Communism is supposed to be you work for the good, you're not trying to make a profit. And they basically flip it and they're like, this system's not working, bro. We got to do something. So they allow for more economic freedom. He also allows for more political freedoms, what's called glasnost. And glasnost says, for the past 30, 40 years, you've had almost no political freedoms. We are now going to start allowing freedom of press, so you can write whatever you want, and freedom of speech. You can speak out against the government if you want, which was unheard of up to this point, for the most part, in the Soviet Union. Here's the problem. You have been controlling people for the past 40 years, people who aren't Russian. You have Polish people and Czech people, and you have Belarusians, you have all these Ukrainians, you have all these people that you've been controlling and not having any freedoms. And now suddenly you're like, here's some freedoms, have fun. And people are going to be like, we are mad at you. We do not like you. We are angry. And what happens as a result of these changes, although they're good in the grand scheme of things, they're not really good for Gorbachev and the Soviet Union. They're good for people in general, that a lot of these regions, like I just mentioned, East Germany, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, Ukraine over here, are going to start saying, we aren't down with this. We want our freedom and independence. And as a result of glasnost, as a result of these political freedoms, as a result of perestroika and economic freedoms, these countries start breaking away from Russia. And these countries that were satellite countries, these countries that were under the control of the Soviet Union since 1945 and the end of the war, when the Soviet Union soldiers did not leave Russia, are now demanding their independence. And in the 1980s, late 80s, early 90s, all these countries start popping up. So Germany becomes united again. Czech Republic becomes a country. Poland, I mean, you can see it. I don't need to read all these off, but all these countries, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Belarus, I'm reading them off anyway, all become independent. And one of the main symbols of the Cold War was the Berlin Wall being built in 1961. And in 1989, both East Berliners, people from East Berlin, and West Berliners, people from West Berlin, tear down the walls. And it becomes the symbol of the Cold War, that the Cold War is beginning to end. And in the early 90s, the Soviet Union falls. And for about 10 years in the 90s, there's a lot of chaos in Russia. There's, it's this controlled, tight system for many years. And now suddenly you're going to create a democracy, and what do you do with the nuclear weapons? Who gets those? What about if the nuclear weapons were what if we have nuclear weapons in Poland, for example, but let's say they had nuclear weapons in Poland. Who gets to keep those nuclear weapons? So there's a lot of chaos and confusion in the 90s in Russia. So it's kind of capitalist today. It's kind of democratic today. And the leader who's been in power since 2000, who brought stability back to Russia, and that's how he gained power, is Vladimir Putin. He was the equivalent of the CIA in the Soviet Union, which is their KGB. He was a former colonel there. His goal, he's been in power since 2000. He's won multiple terms. The 2024 election, he won 87% of the vote. No one wins 87% of the vote in any election anywhere for anything, for the most part. It just doesn't happen. So it shows that there's some kind of corruption there. He has limited people's freedoms. He has threatened the United States. He has gone and invaded countries, and his goal is to reclaim lost land after the fall of communism. And for example, this land right here of the Ukraine was lost after the fall of communism. So he has invaded there. And a lot of these countries here, not so much Belarus, but these countries right here are very worried about being invaded by Russia as Putin tries to reclaim land. But we'll talk more about him in class. This is him. I don't know why he decided to take his shirt off and ride a horse, but judgment-free zone. Anyway, any questions, let me know. I'm out.